Number 38, Wing Company. With regards to Wing Company's financial statements for the year ended 31st of December 18, discuss the impact that pandemic and subsequent events will have on the assessment regarding Wing Company's ability to remain a going concern. Wing Company manufactures textiles products and is currently assessing the impact of a global pandemic on its operations. The financial year end for the company is 31st of December 2018. The following exhibit available below provides information relevant to the question. Impact of the pandemic describes the impact of the pandemic on certain aspects of Wing Company's business. Uh, the information should be used to answer the question. Okay? The impact of pandemic. There are several measures taken by government and banks in the jurisdiction which Wing Company operates in to provide relief for companies which have been negatively affected by the pandemic. The Business Reduction Loan Scheme provides lenders with the government guarantee of 90% of each loan to give lenders confidence to continue to provide finance to the companies. The National Bank is also buying short-term debt from the companies. Wing Company has a history of profitable operations and relies on external financing sources. Wing Company has taken advantage of the government support measures. However, its operations have been temporarily suspended before and after the reporting date of 31st of December 18. The impact of pandemic has created circumstances which are changing rapidly. So because of the so we have to ये सब copy paste करेंगे कि Wing Company has a history of profitable operations and relies on external of financing operations. ठीक है ना? Uh, However, its operations have been temporarily suspended before and after the reporting date. ये भी copy paste करेंगे. Because of the temporary suspension of the operations, the business activities would have stopped, and thus there would be a question mark on the profitable operations on whether the company would be able to generate profits for the current year. And uh, in accordance with IAS 1 presentation of financial statements, an entity must assess and disclose the fact that they are a going concern. That is, they can carry out their business activities for the foreseeable future. However, as there are question mark on the profits, there can be a going concern test that has to be carried out, in which if the company fails to identify as a going concern, then it has to prepare its financial statements on a breakup basis. Then pandemic has significantly affected global supply chain. तो ये भी एक point है. Pandemic has affected the global supply chain where Wing Company has several contracts to sell at a fixed price. The government requires a shutdown of Wing Company's manufacturing facilities. So because of manufacturing facilities, the company might not be able to produce the goods, and meaning that company cannot deliver the goods itself without first buying them from the third party at a significant higher cost. So मतलब, first of all, we cannot deliver the goods to the customers, and if we want to, then without first and we have to first buy the goods from the third party at a significantly higher cost, which will increase the cost of sales and increase the cost of purchasing actually the goods than the revenue that is actually being earned by Wing Company. Certain contracts might get cancelled. हाँ यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है. Normally, if the Wing Company terminates the contract, then it incurs a penalty. Exceptionally, some contracts can be cancelled without paying compensation. Hmm. So usually Wing Company had to terminate certain contracts. We can assume that Wing Company also had to terminate certain contracts with regards to the current pandemic that has been going on. Because of this contract cancellation, there might have been penalties that have been posed on most of the contracts which the company had to pay. Provision would have to be made for these penalties. Uh, Next one, this is a cost incurred by the company. There also might be certain customers who would have cancelled the contracts, leading to a decrease in the Wing Company's estimated revenue. तो फिर बस इतना लिख सकते हैं. पढ़ते हैं इन्होंने क्या लिखा हुआ है। IFRS, the IFRS conceptual framework of financial reporting states that the going concern assumption is an underlying assumption. Thus, the financial statement presume that an entity will continue in operation indefinitely, or if that presumption is not valid, relevant disclosures and different bases of reporting are required. IAS 1 presentation of financial statements requires management when preparing financial statements to make assessment of the entity's ability to continue as a going concern. Assessment of an entity's ability to continue as a going concern. Okay. And whether the going concern estimate or assumption is valid. And whether the going concern assumption is valid. दे देगा ना is appropriate. The standard requires that available information about the future, which is at least 12 months from the end of the reporting period, should be taken into account. This assessment needs to be performed up to the date on which the financial statements are issued and should take into account the measures taken by the government and banks to provide relief to affected companies. Wing Company has taken advantage of the Business Reduction Loan Scheme and National Bank Short-Term Debt Scheme, but its operations have been suspended before and after the reporting date. And in addition, the company has several contracts which may turn out to be loss-making, and its investment properties appear to have lost value due to the pandemic. The director should take into consideration the existence and anticipated effects of the pandemic on the entity's activities. Wing Company has a history of profitable operations and relies on external financing, but because of the pandemic, it finds itself in difficulties. The directors have to consider the expected impact on liquidity and profitability before they can satisfy themselves that going concern basis is appropriate. दिस कंसिडर मतलब डायरेक्टर्स को असेस करना चाहिए कि वेदर लिक्विडिटी एंड प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी मेंटेन हो रही है कि नहीं हो रही है। और हाँ, रिलायंस एक्सटर्नल फाइनेंसिंग बट बिकॉज दिस पैंडेमिक इट फाइंड इटसेल्फ इन डिफिकल्टीज, मतलब विंग कंपनी ने एडवांटेज लिया होगा बिजनेस लोन रिडक्शन स्कीम का वगैरह वगैरह, पर टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट वुड दैट बेनिफिट हेल्प द कंपनी, वो जज करना इम्पोर्टेंट है। द कंसिडरेशन इज पर्टिकुलरली रेलेवेंट when given that operations have been temporarily suspended. Significant judgments and continual updates to assessments up to the date of issuance of the financial statements may be required given the evolving nature of pandemic and related uncertainties. ठीक है। Judgment date on insurance transfer may be required given evolving। ठीक है, मतलब एक बेसिकली ये जजमेंट के ऊपर रहता है कंपनी के कि कंपनी और आगे चल सकती है कि नहीं चल सकती। वो एक लास्ट पॉइंट में इन्होंने खाली बोला हुआ है। अभी आगे बढ़ते हैं। अकाउंटिंग फॉर वनरस कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स be affected several locations. The government requires shutdown of wing company manufacturing facilities. The wing company would not be able to deliver itself without first buying from the third party. तो ये रहा wing company cannot, ये रहा wing company cannot deliver the goods itself without buying them from the third party at a significant cost. So onerous contracts are contracts for in which the cost of implementing or executing the contract is higher than the actual revenue earned from it. ठीक है। Normally, if wing company terminates the contract, there is a penalty. Exceptionally, some contracts can be cancelled without penalty compensation, without paying compensation. Several investment properties, अच्छा। हाँ, तो ये जो है विंग कंपनी का, ये तो पूरा इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रॉपर्टी के ऊपर है, यहाँ से नीचे का। तो इसके ऊपर का ही जो है ना, इधर तक ये यही ये दिस पैराग्राफ इटसेल्फ इज द onerous contract. So IAS 30, in accordance with IAS 37, provisions, contingent liability and contingent assets, a provision can be made for onerous contracts because there's a present obligation as a result of past event that has occurred here. वो प्रोविजन के 3 स्टेप्स बता देंगे, कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स बता देंगे, फिर वो लीगल एंड कंस्ट्रक्टिव ऑब्लिगेशन है कि नहीं वो बता देंगे। इन दिस केस इट इज नॉट अ लीगल बट आई थिंक इट्स अ कंस्ट्रक्टिव ऑब्लिगेशन। नहीं, फिर कंस्ट्रक्टिव कैसे, ये लोग पिछले साल से थोड़ी ना ऐसा कर रहे हैं, लीगली होना चाहिए फिर तो। चेक करते हैं। When there is contracts in a contract in which the unavoidable cost of meeting the obligation under the contract exceed the economic benefits expected to be received from it. मैंने बोला था cost of executing the contract exceed the revenue earned from it, but it is much better language. When there is contract is a contract when the unavoidable cost of meeting the obligations under the contract exceed the economic benefits expected to be received under it. The unavoidable cost under a contract reflect minimal cost of exiting the contract, which is lower of the cost of fulfilling it, and any compensation arising from cancelling the contract. IAS 37 provisions, contingent liability and contingent asset requires the entity to recognize and measure the present obligation under the contract as a provision. Before a separate provision for a onerous contract is established, an entity recognizes an impairment loss, it just occurred on the assets डेडिकेटेड टू द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट। मतलब अगर कोई एसेट्स होंगे डेडिकेटेड टू द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट तो उनके लिए इम्पेयरमेंट करना चाहिए पहले बिफोर मेकिंग अ प्रोविजन। One significant impact of the pandemic is the disruption of global supply chain. Wing Company has contracts to sell at a fixed price, and because of the shutdown of its manufacturing facilities, which was required by the government, it cannot deliver the goods itself without first buying them from the third party at a significant higher cost. all all contracts should be reviewed to determine, मतलब ये तो इन्होंने लिटरली कॉपी पेस्ट किया हुआ है, ये पूरा का पूरा पैराग्राफ। ठीक है ना, कॉपी पेस्टेड है। इसके नीचे ऑल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट शुड बी रिव्यूड टू डिटरमाइन इफ देयर आर एनी स्पेशल टर्म्स which may relieve the entity of its obligations or any contracts which can be cancelled without paying compensation. In this case, such contracts are not deemed onerous as there is no obligation. In such cases, such contracts are not deemed onerous as there is no obligation. आगे बढ़ते हैं। Fair value measurement of investment in property. Wing company has several investment properties which it measures at fair value and according to IFRS 13 fair value measurement. The pandemic has significantly affected the market price of these properties. The directors of Wing Company are of the opinion that the market is undervaluing its properties and have therefore decided to disregard the market prices at 31st of December 18. The directors claim that some of the market transactions are not representative as they are based upon the transactions which are forced due to the cash flow problems of the vendors. The directors have indicated that they would not sell the properties in the current market. There have been a significant decrease in the volume of the transactions in the property market. However, several properties similar to those held by Wing Company have sold in December 18. Okay. According to conceptual framework, fair value measure actually nahi. According to IFRS 13, fair value measurement, fair value is the price at which an asset can be where a selling of an asset and transferring of a liability takes place in an orderly transaction between market participants at a measurement date. An orderly transaction is a transaction which is not forced by the market participants. It is a normal transaction that has been taken into consideration. ठीक है ना? uh, in order to find out a true fair value, the fair value at in an active market is taken into consideration. That is, the principal market is taken into consideration rather than the most advantageous market. A principal market is a market in which high value transactions takes place, and most advantageous market is a market in which the best price can be allotted um, and would be favorable to the entity. क्या वही इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रॉपर्टीज के बारे में बताना है क्या कि According to IS 40, investment properties were measured at fair value. Investment properties are measured at fair value. एक्चुअली नहीं, IS 40 में क्यों जाए फालतू में, क्योंकि इन्होंने बोला है इन अकॉर्डिंग टू IFRS 13. ठीक है, इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रॉपर्टीज आर मेजर्ड एट फेयर वैल्यू. And as the pandemic has significantly affected the market price of these properties, there has been the carrying amount of these investment properties would be higher in the books of a wing company rather than what the market value is. The market is undervaluing its properties and are therefore deciding to disregard the market prices at 31st December 18. The directors claim that some of the market transactions are not representative as they are based upon transactions which are forced the vendors. Fair value is not determined on the basis of what the company's transactions would be, and the company's intention of holding the asset in market downturn is irrelevant. Okay. So the claim of the directors that they are not going to sell the properties in the current market is not valid. ठीक है? उसके बाद as we can see that the market has undervalued, though the market has undervalued some of the properties. नहीं यार ऐसे नहीं. See, as the market price of the properties has fallen down, मुझे लगता है impairment होना चाहिए in accordance with IAS 36. मुझे ऐसा लगता है. Hmm. However, there has been a decrease in the volume of transactions, and this should be taken into consideration because एक वॉल्यूम ट्रांजेक्शन में जब कम हो जाता है ना, तो फिर मतलब देन इट इज नॉट एन एक्टिव मार्केट, इट इज एन इनएक्टिव मार्केट. ऐसा. लेट्स चेक. मैं बोलना चाहता हूँ इम्पेयरमेंट के बारे में, बट आई रियली डाउट कि इम्पेयरमेंट के बारे में बोला होगा इन्होंने यार. जो कहीं भी IAS 36 लिखा हुआ दिख रहा है. नहीं. नहीं, सिर्फ उन्होंने फेयर वैल्यू पे ही खेला है. लेट्स चेक. IFRS 13 fair value measurement says that the objective of a fair value measurement is to estimate the price at which an orderly transaction, ये रहा वो word, even to sell an asset or transfer a liability would take place between market participants at the measurement date under current market conditions. Due to the pandemic, valuations which will be subject to significant measurement uncertainty. As a result, there will be a wider range of possible estimates of fair value measurement. Wing company is required to apply judgment to find the fair value which is the most representative of the circumstances. हम लोग ये बोल देते हैं कि fair value is very judgmental and judgment should be applied by wing company. ये बोल देते ना तो भी मतलब सही रहता. The definition of fair value requires an orderly transaction that is not forced transactions. Evidence is of an orderly transaction must be evaluated when estimating fair value measurement. If the observed price is based on the transaction which is determined to be forced, then little weight should be placed on it. मतलब अगर वो एक forced transaction है तो फिर उसके ऊपर उतना भाव नहीं, मतलब उसको भाव नहीं देना चाहिए बिकॉज वो एक forced transaction है ना. लेकिन अगर वो एक ऑर्डरली ट्रांजैक्शन होता है विच इज अ नॉर्मल ट्रांजैक्शन, देन वो ट्रांजैक्शन हमने एक रैंडम बेसिस पे सिलेक्ट किया रहता है तो उसको ज्यादा महत्व देना चाहिए. The fact that the directors have stated that they would not sell their own assets at prices currently observed in the market does not mean that these transactions should be presumed to be forced. IFRS 13 makes clear that fair value is a market-based measurement, not entity-specific, and an entity's intention to hold asset in the market downturn is not relevant. Exactly. There has been significant decrease in the volume of transactions in the property market, and therefore it could be argued that market is not active. An active market is one which transactions for the asset or liability occur with significant frequency and volume to provide pricing information on an ongoing basis. Observable prices from inactive markets may not be representative of the fair value. However, such transactions should not be ignored. मतलब इनएक्टिव मार्केट्स पे कम कम रिलायंस प्लेस करना चाहिए एज कम्पेयर टू एक्टिव मार्केट, लेकिन उसे कम्प्लीटली इग्नोर भी नहीं करना चाहिए. Such transactions should not be ignored, and the relevance of such transactions, such as type equivalent. However, such transactions should not be ignored, and the relevance of the transactions, such as type, the location of the property should be taken into account. We didn't say this, yeah. Location of the property to be taken into account. The significant decrease in the volume of transactions in the market can also influence which valuation technique is used. The market approach can prove challenging, and use additional valuation techniques may be needed. This may need the use of unobservable inputs. However, a significant decrease in the volume of transactions does not automatically mean that the market is no longer active, as transactions may still occur with significant frequency and volume of providing pricing information. मतलब भले ही डिक्रीज हुआ है मार्केट में ट्रांजैक्शंस का होना, बट ऐसा नहीं है कि उसको इनएक्टिव ही मतलब बोल देना चाहिए. सो बेसिकली अगर 10,000 ट्रांजैक्शन की जगह पे 5,000 ट्रांजैक्शन हो रहे हैं, लेकिन फिर भी एक्टिव मार्केट तो है, क्योंकि एटलीस्ट 5,000 तो हो रहे हैं. ऐसा नहीं कि मतलब 500 हो रहे हैं, 1,000 हो रहे हैं, ऐसा. Also, several properties similar to those held by Wing Company have been sold in December. Therefore, data from these sales could be used to measure the fair value of the properties. Relevant prices observed from an orderly transaction in the market must still be considered. It would be inappropriate to measure the fair value based on unobservable inputs, such as income approach, when level to information, such as recent transacted prices, is available. Judgment is required in assessing the relevance of observable market data. There has been a significant decrease in the market activity. तो यहाँ पर जहाँ पर मार्केट फ्रीक्वेंसी कम हो जाती है ट्रांजैक्शंस की, वहां पर जजमेंट की जरूरत पड़ती है. ठीक है. एंड लास्ट टाइम में हमें बोला गया था कि several property prices similar to those held by Wing Company have been sold in December 18. तो मतलब हम इन सब का डेटा ले सकते हैं, इन प्राइम प्रॉपर्टीज का डेटा ले सकते हैं. It would be inappropriate to measure the fair value based on unobservable inputs such as income approach. तो अभी यहाँ पर हमारे पास प्रॉपर्टी प्राइसेस ऑलरेडी अवेलेबल है, लेकिन अगर अनऑब्जर्वेबल रहते तो फिर दिक्कत हो सकती थी. बस इतना बोला है. आगे, discuss the nature of the information that investors of Wing Company will expect to be disclosed in the financial statement as a result of pandemic. Candidates should include, amongst other things, such as factors as disclosure of uncertainties, events after the reporting period, government measures and covenants. ये बोलना है. Hmm. And investors would like to know whether the entity is still a going concern. तो फिर वो IS1 वो सब जो भी था वो सब ऐसा कॉपी पेस्ट करके लिख देंगे. Would like to know the impact of the pan that the impact would like to know the impact that the pandemic has caused on the production manufacturing of the entity. Um, would like to know whether the government has supported government banks in the jurisdiction which Wing Company operates in have provided any reliefs to the government. मतलब गवर्नमेंट ने क्या काम किया है हमारे लिए ऐसा. इन्वेस्टर्स वुड Investors would prefer the disclosures which help them to compare the entity's performance with other entities. कि पता चलना चाहिए ना कि how much our company has suffered through as compared to the other companies or the industry average. Uh, Next one, events after the reporting period. इसके बारे में बात करनी है. According to IAS 10 events after the reporting period. अच्छा, पैंडेमिक सबसे पहले तो हुआ कब है, पहले वो देख लेते हैं ना. It helps the investors understand what the future of the company looks like with in terms of the risk and opportunities. Um, it helps the direct investor understand the management's viewpoint as to see the business in the eyes of the with the eyes of the management and how they are planning to come back from this pandemic situation. Mm, It helps the potential investors understand whether or not the company's operations are safe enough to invest in the company. If they want to invest, and then at what rate of return. Um, Disclosure of uncertainties. There might be a lot of contingent liability and contingent assets in place in terms of insurance. Uh, Contingent liabilities के मैं ज़्यादा बोल सकता हूँ actually. Disclosure of uncertainties and disclosure of these uncertainties and the impact that it would have on the management or the company as a whole. ये बोल सकते हैं government measures and covenants. And according to the IAS 20 government grant, accounting for government grants and government assistance, it helps the investor understand whether there is any government assistance that is in place or whether there are any grants that are being given by the government, so that it helps the entity to come out of the pandemic situation. Uh, Even after the reporting date के लिए क्या बोल सकते हैं यार? If if the event If the pandemic has happened after the reporting period, then it is a non-adjusting event. However, the disclosure of the non-adjusting event is a must, and it is really helpful. अरे और क्या helpfully मैं बोल रहा हूँ बार बार इन्वेस्टर्स के लिए to understand the impact वगैरह यही मैं बोले जा रहा हूँ बार बार. और क्या हो सकता है? If the non-adjusting events are material in nature, then those disclosures and their outcome should be considered or should be mentioned in the disclosures for the investors to understand. uh, I don't know यार, इसके ऊपर कुछ मुझे नहीं पता और क्या बोल सकते हैं. चेक करते हैं. Many investors will be concerned about the disclosure relevant information, particularly information about the pandemic will affect reporting profits and the cash flows of the entity. Investors will be concerned about ineffective communication, lack of clarity, and lack of understandability from the issues which companies are facing as a result of the pandemic. Investors will want a clear explanation of the unusual or infrequently occurring items. तो ये जो चीज थी ये इन्होंने शायद IFRS 13 नहीं, कॉन्सेप्चुअल फ्रेमवर्क से उठाई है, रेलेवेंस, फेथफुल रिप्रेजेंटेशन वगैरह. तो ये अपन बोल सकते थे, एक्चुअली इजी था. जजमेंटल नेचर ऑफ द मटेरियलिटी असेसमेंट्स यूज could lead. यार मटेरियलिटी इज जजमेंटल, ये इजी पॉइंट्स था यार. दिस जजमेंटल रिगार्डिंग व्हाट डिस्क्लोजर शुड the management give to the investor. This was an easy point that we could have written. The judgmental nature of the materiality assessments could lead to companies omitting useful information and from the financial statements. Voluntary information about performance measures and companies provide is often useful to the investors' analysis. Accounting policies are often necessary for understanding information in the financial statements and relate to material items, transactions, or events. Investors will wish to know whether any policies have changed as a result of pandemic or whether the entity has made any significant judgments or assumptions in applying the accounting policies. तो IAS 8 की जगह जैसे हम लोग इनको चेंज करना चाहिए, so that the financial statements can be compared with the previous years. Investors will want to ensure that their companies put effective processes in place to identify and disclose material events after the reporting period, barabar, which could reasonably be expected to influence their decision. Investors will require information about the magnitude of disruption, but the impact actually. मैंने impact बोला था, they have said the word magnitude caused by the pandemic upon the companies that they have invested in, and about those assets and liabilities which are subject to significant estimation uncertainty in order to be better provided with an understanding of the financial impact. Companies may need to use significant judgment to determine the effect of uncertainties related to the pandemic on its revenue accounting. For example, estimation of variable consideration. Right. अभी अभी वेरिएबल कंसिडरेशन होगा rather than प्रॉपर रेवेन्यू जो मिलेगा because of the pandemic. They are right. Investors will require information about decisions made in response to the pandemic. Example, the modifications of contracts, onerous contracts, and disclosures for ongoing and future contracts that may be affected. Other uncertainties may include the potential ability to make a claim on an insurance policy for the effects of pandemic. The terms and conditions of the insurance policy are often complex. Investors would want to know that there is a potential insurance recovery and may require evidence confirming that the insurer will be covering the claim. It should be established that it is virtually certain that the entity will be compensated for at least some of the consequences of the pandemic. Any uncertainty as to the amount receivable should be reflected in the financial statements. मतलब एक्चुअली ने कंटिजेंट एसेट के बारे में ही पूरा ये पैराग्राफ एक्सप्लेन कर दिया है कि इंश्योरेंस अगर मिलेगा तो कौन से तो कितना चांस है कि इंश्योरेंस मिलेगा, देन कितने अमाउंट का मिलेगा और कितना वो हमारे लॉसेस को रिकवर कर सकता है। उस चीज का इम्पैक्ट जानने के लिए इस चीज का डिस्क्लोजर इंपॉर्टेंट है। Characteristics of any loan, tax relief, or rebates received from the government will need to be carefully assessed and the impact disclosed. Uncertainties relating to the income taxes arising from government measures will need to be considered, as well as whether companies should recognize and measure current or deferred tax assets or liabilities in at a different amount. So income taxes always reporting पीरियड के बाद पे होते हैं, राइट? सो मतलब अभी जब पैंडेमिक हो चुका है तो अगर अभी हम लोग लॉस कर रहे हैं लेकिन हमने हमने पूरा साल प्रॉफिट किया था तो भी टैक्स भरना पड़ेगा। लेकिन अभी तो हम लोग लॉस में है ना, तो हाउ विल वी बी एबल टू पे द इनकम टैक्सेस वगैरह, इन सब की बात हुई है। Wing company manufactures tax. Sorry, when Wing company manufactures textile products, investors will require information concerning the effect on its business. For example, issues regarding remote working policies and travel restrictions, right? क्योंकि अभी जो एम्प्लॉयज है वो लोग ट्रैवल नहीं कर पाएंगे, तो इसकी वजह से जो वर्किंग पॉलिसीज में चेंज आएगा, ट्रैवल में जो रिस्ट्रिक्शंस आएंगे, वो वैसे सब कैसे अभी विंग कंपनी हैंडल करने वाली है, उसका इन्वेस्टर्स को एक इन्फॉर्मेशन चाहिए। Wing company will usually have agreed covenants regarding how the business will be operated. This may include a covenant to continue to operate the business in an ordinary course. In the light of the pandemic, Wing company may seek some leeway to operate outside the ordinary course of the business the investors without the investors' consent in order to deal with the disruptions in the business. In light of the pandemic, business continuity becomes critical. Investors will require knowledge of the redundancy and business continuity. अगर हमने इन दिस पैंडेमिक सिचुएशंस कुछ एम्प्लॉयज को रिलीव किया हुआ है, रिडंडेंट किया हुआ है, तो उसके बारे में भी अपने को इन्फॉर्मेशन चाहिए, इंक्लूडिंग द इम्पैक्ट ऑफ द पैंडेमिक ऑन द बोर्ड ऑफ द डायरेक्टर्स एंड एम्प्लॉयज. Given the public health objectives, remote-based industries will attract investor focus. There will also be renewed interest in the biotech and healthcare sectors. As a result, investors may move their funds away from Wing company into these industries. मतलब वही कि वो पोटेंशियल इन्वेस्टर्स को इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए कि नहीं करना चाहिए, तो वो उन्होंने यहाँ पे लास्ट पॉइंट लिया हुआ है ऐसा। ठीक है।